Thank you, Sam, and you all for your very gracious welcome. Someone was visiting with us at the monastery in Cambridge a while back, and a couple of us brothers were standing together, and this guest said, "So what's the most difficult thing about being a monk?" And my brother was standing just beside me. He said, "What's the most difficult thing about being a monk?" And he said, "The monks." And I think that rings largely true for me. That one of the most difficult things in an intentional community, whether it's a monastic community or a parish community, is relating to or avoiding relating to others who have also shown up in our lives. I think the only thing that's greater than that, in my own experience, is the issues about relating to our own selves, or avoiding that. And to the degree that we avoid that, we're going to see ourselves mirrored back to us in other people. I think psychologists call this projection. It's what we can't claim, what we can't reconcile with ourselves, where we're not on our good speaking terms with ourselves. We're going to see in the face and form of other people. I was talking with one of my brothers in the monastery about something, and I said, I guess I've got some baggage around that. And he said, "Chris, that's not baggage, that's freight." We hear Jesus say, "Love your neighbor as you love yourself." And I think that is more descriptive than it is prescriptive. That is simply what will happen. The degree to which we love ourselves and can love ourselves, be on good speaking terms with ourselves, will set the bar for how we're going to love other people. And so I would say, one thing that is not an option is to diss yourself. Do you know that word? It's a word that comes from the streets, to disrespect yourself. We have to hold ourselves and carry ourselves, report ourselves among others with the kind of love which we hear Jesus has for us. And one of the options is not to diss ourselves, including dissing ourselves because we think we're not worthy of God's love, which puts ourselves with higher standards than God has. It makes ourselves God unwittingly. To the degree that we're on good speaking terms with ourselves, we'll raise the bar. I mean, I think we should be our own best friends. No one will know what you have been through in your life, what it's taken for you to get to this moment in your life. You're probably a walking miracle. And most people will never know, but you know. Carry yourself with enormous charity and compassion and generosity. When you're brushing your teeth in the morning, wink at yourself in the mirror. You're amazing. You're a walking miracle. And then, you know, with the people that we're going to interact with, such as in a parish community, wonderful parish communities such as Trinity, I'll tell you something that would make it easier, in my experience. And that is if Jesus had higher standards. You know, the language that we hear Jesus using, remembered in the Gospels, is he's come to minister to the lost, the imprisoned, the brokenhearted, the captives. He's talking about us. I mean, that is a group whom he's come to meet and serve. One of the metaphors he uses to describe us is sheep. I spent a summer with a shepherd some years back. Have you been around sheep? Mm-hmm. I mean, they are the most clueless animals. Why sheep got such a good rap and why goats that were very smart and quite cooperative such a bad rap. It's a question I have for the heavens, but we're called sheep, and it's hardly a compliment. Do you remember when Jesus begins his public ministry, remembered in Luke's Gospel, chapter 4, Luke remembers Jesus coming to a synagogue, being given a scroll, and he's like a lay reader reading from a scroll. What he's reading from is Isaiah 61. And he reads, "The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the freeing of those who are bound, to comfort those who mourn, to give them a garland instead of ashes, a mantle of praise instead of a faint spirit. Bind up the brokenhearted, proclaim liberty to the captives, comfort to those who are bound, freeing from those who are imprisoned." That's where his public ministry begins. If you were a politician, that would be his stump speech. And he's talking about us. So I'd say, one of the things that makes life in a church community so challenging is, I'm calling it Jesus' standards being so low. Presuming in us just abject neediness. And that we show up to the communion rail with beggar's palms, desperately needy and hungry, which is how Jesus meets us and finds us, gives us hope and healing. In the Greek, we hear that Jesus has come to be our Savior. And in the Greek, you draw from the same etymological root, to save and to salve, like if you've been burned or cut, to salve, and to salvage. Save, salve, salvage. It's the same etymological root in English too. And this is what Jesus has come to be and do, to be our Savior and our Saver and our Salvager, which can be an enormous wellspring of hope. But it also is a kind of heads up that these are the kinds of folks that we're going to be sharing the pews with. Very low standards, full of hope. And then when we hear Jesus in the Gospel speak, he's often speaking to you. But except in those moments when he's speaking specifically to a person, like the woman at the well, if he's not speaking specifically to a person, when Jesus says you, it's plural. I mean, we can't hear it in the English, but it's you all. It's you all. It's you all. Jesus presuming that we're in this together, that our relationship to Jesus is very personal, but it's not private. Very personal, but not private. Which is what you're living out as a parish community. As you're living out a life together. And we don't have to go very far in the Gospels to discover that life together is quite challenging. In John's Gospel, the verb that Jesus uses is abide. And if you unpack that verb in the Greek, it means like hang in there. Because the challenges are great. But so are the rewards. And I would say that the rewards are why it is such a grace to hang in there, to abide, to be with one another. And I want to say some why in my coming out of my own experience, living in a monastery. But I think that probably many of the dynamics that I live with day in and day out are dynamics that you will know as a parish community, and probably other communities to which you belong, spouse or partner, friend, colleagues, outreach groups here at Trinity, where you're living life in some kind of committed, explicitly or implicitly committed relationship with others. I want to name several what I want to call best practices of how to glean the most about life together, which some days can be enormously challenging. One thing I think that will make a world of difference is to live with gratitude, to live Eucharistically. The reason that we celebrate the Holy Eucharist upstairs here in the church and week by week by week, the reason we celebrate the Holy Eucharist, which comes from a Greek word meaning thanksgiving, great thanksgiving, the reason we celebrate the Holy Eucharist is not to be having lived a very kind of horizontal life, normal humdrum, and then to have a kind of elevated spiritual moment in the Eucharist and then come back down to normal. It's really the opposite. We celebrate the Holy Eucharist as a kind of living reminder of how to be living life all the time. It sets a kind of template for how to live Eucharistically with gratitude. Living gratefully will not take away difficult things in your life, including difficult people. It won't take any of that away, but it will rebalance the weight of your life, and you'll get in touch with so much more than you might have missed. Another way of putting this is to live your life as a gift and not as a given. To live your life gratefully. And I would say how to live your life gratefully is start where you are. Always start where you are. So if you find just now, for example, that you can sit in a chair without having to be strapped in, you can hold yourself upright. Be grateful. If you can breathe without mechanical assistance, be grateful. If at the moment of your choosing, you can stand up and find your sense of balance and decide where you want your feet to take you. If you can reach out your hand to a cup which has coffee in it, and you've got the muscular coordination to lift this cup to your face, and you can sip on this delicious coffee, and you have coffee, which is hot. Right? Are you with me? I mean, you could get on a roll. It would be a way of praying without ceasing. To practice living your life Eucharistically. Practice living your life full of gratitude. It will change the balance of your life. And what is otherwise so weighty and maybe so discouraging will not automatically be taken away. But you will get in touch with a force which is so immeasurably great that it will put a spring to your gait and a gleam to your eyes, light to your countenance. It will make a world of difference to you, and it will make a world of difference to other people. You're expressing gratitude to them. In my experience, there are two sorts of people who go underthanked, who miss receiving gratitude. One group of people, I'll call those who can easily be down and out. People whose life is largely one of service to others of us. People who collect tolls, drive buses, meet us at the CVS checkout, carry our dishes away from the restaurant table. We could make a long, long list. People whose life is largely service and duty, and oftentimes desperation. I was coming back from New York City on Amtrak and got off at South Station, and I was walking down the ramp into the train station. And just as I was walking by the cab of the engine of the train, the engineer was climbing down the ladder from the engine. And I said to him, as we were now walking sort of side by side, I said, "Thanks for the great ride." Well, South Station, a lot of noise in the air there from lots of trains there. And I said, "Thanks for the great ride." And this engineer, big guy, portly, suspenders, flannel shirt, grease here and there, big guy. He turned to me and said, "What did you say?" Working up the courage, I said, "Thanks for the great ride. I got on at Penn Station, and I've come with you here into Boston." And this big, tough guy stopped dead in his tracks. And he had tears in his eyes, just like that. And he said, "I have been driving trains for more than 30 years, and no one has ever thanked me." Oh. That shouldn't be. That shouldn't be. You'll change someone's day, and you may change their life by thanking them. And there are folks under this roof today, here, who would be so moved to be thanked. Don't make it up, but don't miss an opportunity. For someone who is down and out, and maybe they got bread in their cupboard, but they feel down and out, It may have nothing to do with money. They feel down and out. I think down and out folks are underthanked, and probably all of us have been in that category more than once, maybe today. The other category of people who I think are underthanked are people who are up and out. And these are leaders. These are our leaders. And probably all of us also are leaders or have been leaders. It may be in a very small domain or a very large domain, but we're the point person for making something happen. And many leaders, when they're in their leadership role, are not thanked. And it's not because people aren't grateful, but in some ways, in your leadership role, the more dependable you are, the more predictable you are, the more wonderful you are, always, is probably going to set you up for being thanked all the less, because you're always like this. You're amazing. And surely you know, surely. As if when we are in our leadership mode, you know what I mean by leadership? I mean, when it's up to us, however big the pond is, it's up to us. I think oftentimes others just assume our soul is kind of like a nuclear power plant, and the energy just comes from inside of us. It just comes inside of us. It doesn't need any kind of outside input. But oh, that would make such a difference. So I would say if there's some leaders in your life, leaders here in this wonderful community, for whom you may be very thankful, but haven't expressed it. And who am I? They would surely know. Surely they know. Who am I? Oh, say it. Say it to them. Say it to them. Being grateful is transformative. It consecrates life. It will change someone's day, and it will make perhaps a world of difference to their whole life. And there's a cousin to thank you. And the cousin is, you're welcome. People are going to need to thank you. They're going to want and need to thank you. And when they do, say you're welcome. Don't say no problem. Don't apologize for your underperformance. Say you're welcome. Say you're welcome. And say it from the bottom of your heart. You're welcome. As if to say, and there's more where that came from. You're welcome. I mean, you're really welcome. You're welcome. Gratitude, absolutely transformative. Something else I think is a best practice. At Easter, we're going to renew our baptismal promises. And there's one phrase that we will promise: to respect the dignity of every human being. We have to respect our own dignity. I mean, it's going to start with us. And the degree to which we can or can't do that is going to set the bar for others, Respect your own dignity. And if that's too far of a reach for you alone, get some help. You're worth it. Just get some help. If there's a block in respecting your dignity, get some help. Help is helpful. Get some help. You're worth it. You're worth it. You're worth it. There's a wonderful phrase in Psalm 17, and it shows up in Compline, for those of you who pray Compline at the end of the night. Keep us as the apple of your eye. Keep us as the apple of your eye. Now that's a metaphor. That's a metaphor. What's the metaphor? Well, you'll know about this. Probably all of you. If you have held or been held by someone lovingly, very, 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 very closely. Could be a little baby, child, infant, could be a very close friend, could be your spouse or partner. I mean, if you're holding or being held very closely, you can see yourself reflected in their pupil. Have you had that experience? You can see yourself reflected in their pupil. The pupil is the apple. That's the metaphor. That's the metaphor. Keep us as the apple of your eye. Keep us, God, gracious God, as the apple of your eye. Which is, there is simply no sweeter way for the psalmist to remind us how adored we are by God. Adored. Keep us as the apple of your eye. Absolutely adored. God is smitten with you. You make God's day. Respect your own dignity, and if that's a reach, get some help with it, because it's true. God looks upon you with eyes of adoration, and God's got big plans to spend eternity with you, so get going on it. Get going. The other thing about respecting dignity is, of course, respecting the dignity of others. Some people do not have dignity, and the way they act shows it. And the only way they're going to have dignity is if we give it to them. We have to give it to them before we can respect it, because they don't have it. Maybe they never had it. Maybe it was robbed from them, quite tragically. But to bequeath dignity onto someone, how we treat them, speak to them, look upon them, have time for them, have space in our heart for them. I think a wonderful bias to have as we navigate with other people who are sometimes acting very poorly and sometimes quite unacceptably. I think a wonderful bias to have is to presume that how they are acting is the best they can do right now. And it may be appalling, it may be wrong, it may be illegal. Maybe, I'm not dismissing inappropriate behavior, but I'm talking about how we regard this person ultimately in our heart. I mean, this person is still a child of God. And I think it can make a world of difference if we presume if someone is in a bad way, and we may be paying some price for it, and we may need to take some action to be saved for it. We may need to do something about this. But ultimately, how we regard this person is to presume that they're doing the best they can, which may not be too well. And I think this is what Jesus is in touch with when he says, bless, don't curse. Because people who are a mess and acting a mess are well apprised of being cursed. They've already got that, and they don't need our help with that. But to pray some kind of intervention for them, intervention of God's light and God's life and God's love, because God has it for them. And the fact that we've been brought into their hemisphere may be something of God's agency for them. I think it can make a great difference to presume most of the time with most people what's going on right now is they're doing the best they can, which may not be too well, which may open up our hearts for them. My sense is that if we do not find compassion for someone, we probably don't know enough about them. If we don't find compassion for someone, who they are, what they are, how they've gotten to be the way they are, if we don't find compassion for them as we experience them, we probably don't know enough about them. Because their story is probably amazing, how they're even still alive in this very moment we're experiencing them. The founder of our community, Richard Muse Benson, said 100 years ago, he said, the real movement in our heart should be from judgment of other people to compassion for other people, to identification with other people. He said to move from judgment of another person to compassion for another person, to identification with another person. And what's behind Father Benson's notion of this kind of movement of our own soul is that Jesus preaches one gospel. There's not this kind of smorgasbord gospel depending on, what category you're in. It's one gospel for prince or pauper. It's just one gospel. Because under our some days glittering images, we're all so much the same. I'm going to name one more thing. Gratitude. Gratitude. Live gratefully. Find compassion so you can bequeath dignity. For yourself, do that first. Get some help if you need it, then for others. Philo of Alexandria said, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a great battle." That's from the 1st century. Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a great battle. Gratitude, tender regards for others. And the third thing is a kind of heads up. And it's something that we tell new brothers in the monastery. It's one of the promises we make. And that is, you're going to be given a teacher. Not of your choosing, and maybe not of your liking. And this teacher is going to expose you. You who are so nice, spiritual, integrated, generous, poised, you know, all these good things, which are true, aren't so except when they're not. And there's going to be someone here under this roof who's going to get under your skin. And this is your teacher. They're going to expose you. You're going to get in touch with, what are you going to get in touch with? Anger. And you know what? It's your anger. It's your anger. I mean, they've got this stuff undoubtedly, but what they're going to awaken in you is your anger. So we tell brothers when they're arriving, you're going to be given a teacher, at least one. And it will be an experience of kind of like Velcro, you know, with a lot of interchanges we have in life, you know, it's like water off the duck's back, you know, or it's lapping up the water, you know. But there are some encounters or some people with whom we're prone to get stuck like Velcro, you know. And, you know, there's two sides to Velcro. I mean, they've got their stuff. I'm not denying that. We've all got our stuff. But we're giving you brothers heads up. They're going to discover your stuff. I mean, you're going to discover your stuff through them. I think the people who have a way of getting under our skin probably belong there. And people whom we could be very quick to write off, to condemn, to say, like the Pharisee in the Gospels, I thank my God that I'm not like him or her. Well, if they've gotten through to us, if they've broken through to us, there's something of us in them. And they've come to us not to accost us, but they may be God's intervention in our life, an angelic presence. And so this may be a person for whom rather than writing off or avoiding, a person for whom we might find it very meaningful to pray for and to pray thanks for what they have illuminated in our own heart, which has been kept so nicely concealed under our coiffed, but is now being exposed, at least we know it. They being emissaries of our own conversion, our own change. Someone came to me just a couple of weeks ago and was lamenting how they act in life, and especially how they act in life with the people who are most important to them. People under the roof. And they expressed some anger and then lots of tears, and said to me, I don't think I'll ever change. And asked me what I thought. And I said, I think you've chosen the wrong religion. Because the gospel message is that Jesus presumes not only do we need to change, but it's actually possible. Absolute, radical change as we become real, whole, teeming with life. And God will bring us together with people who have got as many needs as we are. And this will be the context in which we'll be working on our salvation. We really do need one another. Sometimes it's the experience of, that image of rocks in a bag, that, rocks in a bag, and after they've shaken together long enough time, finally the rocks become polished. It may be that experience some days, or it may be an experience just full of delight and amazement. But Jesus has intention of changing us and making us real, for which we need enormous help from one another. And you've got one another. One last word from St. Paul's letter to the Colossians. As God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Bear with one another. And if anyone has a complaint against another, forgive each other. Just as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. Above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in the one body. And be thankful. Amen. Amen.